Thanks for joining us again. We're here today to talk about the second half of our hypothetical Illinois farmer's journey as he enters the winter and into the following spring. So if you missed our first episode, be sure to go back and catch episode 1.
So this is interesting. This is where we now give farmers the ability to get value, not just from the crops and the commodities they sell, but actually the practices they use. So the farmer using the ForGround application is able to document and verify the practices that he or she uses on the farm, and then those practices can be turned into income for the farmer.
You know, what's interesting is that only recently the very first flight using only sustainable aviation fuel was announced. And so, you know, it's a transition, I think, about new demands needed and new sources needed for different things like biofuels or aviation fuels. And that makes a great fit for a potential crop like CoverCress, where we're using the same land to grow another crop, and it has a specific use case in this instance. It can be used in that kind of aviation fuel use. And I love the story because, you know, CoverCress grew up from being a weed, pennycress, and through modern breeding together with CRISPR gene editing, we now have the potential of a brand new crop, CoverCress, which meets the needs of the aviation fuel standard industry, and something that farmers can adopt into their corn soy rotation.
Yeah, it really creates a win-win for farmers because they have a potential additional revenue source from the second crop or third crop, and they get to be part of the sustainability of transportation in the future.
Yeah, and for this to all work well, the farmer has to be able to execute this multi-season plan, and this is where we have digital capabilities in FieldView, for example, that allows the farmer to understand how to think about the operation for the entire 2 or 3 cycles of crops.
Yeah, and in this scenario, the farmer's planting his spring crop later, right, because of the timing of his winter harvest of CoverCress, and that really takes some intentionality and some planning, and I think some myth busting, right? Some myth that if you plant soybean late, you're going to take a yield hit.
Right.
And of course, we have the data today, we have the analytics to select varieties that are going to produce well, they're going to mature well, even under later planting conditions.
Yeah, and maybe as another myth buster, we think about crop protection only as, you know, providing protection against a disease or killing a weed. But in fact, you know, using them applied on the seed, they have a very important role to play of protecting that root system. And that ultimately means that we're making plants more drought tolerant because that root system is key to acquiring that water.
So hopefully you've gotten a sense for how we're helping the farmer be more productive, but also having a system that's more sustainable. And at the same time, we're making it easy for the farmer to implement these practices, to document the practices and get additional revenue. So in the end, driving a more productive, a more regenerative form of agriculture, which is what's needed as we move into the future.
Now, our next chat's going to look a little different. We're going to zoom over to Europe. We're going to look at a tomato farmer who's using really science-based technology to grow higher-yielding hybrids. So that'll be a little different for us. Thanks for listening in.